Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's chilling story, I have a small request. If you enjoy the dark, dramatic tales we bring to you, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to create even more unique content. Now, for those with strong hearts and a fascination for the darkest corners of human creativity, prepare yourselves. What you are about to read is a work of fiction, but it delves deep into the horrifying depths of a mind that turned art into a weapon of terror. This is the story of a killer whose canvas was society itself, leaving behind masterpieces painted with blood and fear across America. Let's begin. The vibrant pulse of New York City in late autumn was a symphony of yellows, oranges, and the crisp, clean scent of impending winter. Madison Avenue shimmered under the pale sunlight, its galleries and boutiques exuding an air of understated elegance and immense wealth. Among them, Eclat Gallery, owned by the venerable and notoriously discerning art critic Elias Thorne, stood as a beacon of minimalist chic. Tonight, however, the usual murmur of high society and polite artistic debate was shattered, replaced by the guttural wail of sirens and the frantic whispers of uniformed officers. Detective Kane Riley, a man whose face carried the permanent shadows of too many sleepless nights, pushed through the police tape. His partner, Detective Lena Hansen, a sharp, analytical mind barely out of her 30s, but with a track record that belied her youth, was already inside, her slender frame a stark contrast to the grim tableau within. Kane had seen countless horrors, but the scene unfolding before him was different. It wasn't just a murder, it was a statement. Elias Thorne, a man whose critiques could make or break careers, lay sprawled in the center of his pristine gallery. His body wasn't merely dead. It had been arranged. He was draped over a pedestaled sculpture, a bronze abstract piece that usually held court in the gallery's main hall. His limbs were contorted, his pale, lifeless hands posed as if still gesturing a final, damning critique. His eyes, wide and vacant, stared up at a large, blank canvas that hung on the far wall, a cruel parody of the art he so meticulously judged. But the most disturbing detail, the one that made even Kane's seasoned stomach churn, was the medium. Elias Thorne wasn't just dead. He was the central figure of a macabre installation. Streaks of crimson, undoubtedly blood, had been meticulously applied to the canvas, not in random splatters, but in deliberate, almost painterly strokes, forming what appeared to be the skeletal outline of a human figure. It was abstract, terrifyingly so, yet undeniably a depiction of the very essence of human fragility. And on Thorne's chest, carved with surgical precision, was a single, stylized letter, an M. "Forensics is still processing, Kane," Hansen said, her voice unusually subdued. "No forced entry." The security system was sophisticated, but it was disarmed from the inside, flawlessly. No fingerprints, no trace evidence beyond what we'd expect. "And the M?" Kane grunted, circling the scene with a cautious reverence, not wanting to disturb the killer's perverse artwork. "Too clean to be done post-mortem with a blunt object. Looks like a scalpel. And the blood on the canvas. This is undoubtedly. But the way it's applied, it's not a frenzied attack. It's deliberate, controlled, artistic almost." "Artistic?" Kane scoffed, running a hand over his stubbled jaw. "There's nothing artistic about this, Lena. It's sick." "I agree," she conceded. "But look at the composition, the lighting, the placement of Thorne's body, the empty canvas. It's all part of a larger picture, Kane. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this exact scene. This wasn't just about killing Elias Thorne. It was about presenting his death." The initial media frenzy was predictable. The Madison Avenue massacre, the critic's canvas, art world's bloody shadow. The M quickly became the killer's unofficial signature, sparking wild speculation. Was it murderer? Maestro? Or something more sinister, something tied to the enigmatic world of art itself? The public, initially horrified, soon became morbidly fascinated. The idea of an artist, perhaps a disgruntled one, taking revenge on the establishment, resonated with a dark undercurrent of societal frustration. For days, the precinct was a beehive of activity. Art experts were brought in, their esoteric knowledge often more baffling than helpful. They spoke of performance art, Dadaism, and the transgressive nature of modern expression. Kane and Hansen found themselves drowning in a sea of artistic jargon, searching for a solid anchor. What if the M isn't just a letter? Hansen mused one late night, staring at a printout of the crime scene photo. What if it's a symbol, a signature in a different sense, like a monogram for a particularly obscure artist? We've run every artist, every gallery, every art movement that starts with them through the system. Kane sighed, rubbing his temples. Nothing. No obvious grudges against Thorne that would warrant this. Elias Thorne, despite his sharp tongue, had few outright enemies beyond the usual professional rivalries. He was a man of impeccable taste, if unyielding standards. He celebrated new talent, but only if it met his stringent criteria. Could this be the work of someone he had once dismissed, whose career he had unknowingly crushed with a scathing review? The thought was chilling. An artist so consumed by rejection and a desire for recognition that they would turn to murder as their ultimate form of expression. 2 weeks later, the city was just beginning to breathe a tentative sigh of relief, convincing itself that Thorne's murder was an isolated, if bizarre, incident. Then, the news broke like a thunderclap. The victim this time was Julian Vance, a brilliant but controversial performance artist known for his shocking and often grotesque public displays. Vance, whose work frequently challenged the boundaries of decency and comfort, had been found in his sprawling Brooklyn loft. The scene was even more elaborate, more theatrical than Thorne's. Vance was suspended by wires from the ceiling, his body arranged in a cruciform pose, reminiscent of a tortured saint. Around him, the loft had been transformed into a gallery of horrors. Sculptures made from discarded consumer waste, a signature of Vance's, had been meticulously arranged, but now they were smeared with what appeared to be blood, forming abstract patterns that snaked across the floor and up the walls. His own blood, and beneath Vance's suspended form, a large pool of red stained the wooden floorboards, reflecting the harsh studio lights like a dark mirror. On Vance's forehead, precisely carved, was the same stylized M. Kane felt a cold dread settle in his gut. This wasn't a copycat. This was the same killer, escalating, becoming bolder, more confident. The M now seemed less like a simple initial and more like a brand, a claim of ownership. "This is a message, Kane," Hansen said, her voice tight with a mixture of awe and revulsion. "He's not just killing them. He's making them part of his art." Thorne was a critic, a gatekeeper. Vance was a performer, and provocateur. What's the connection? The art world, Kane stated, his gaze sweeping across the gruesome installation. He's targeting people who are deeply entrenched in it, people who shape it, define it, or push its limits. Forensics confirmed their fears. The same precise cutting tools, the same calculated arrangement, the same lack of traceable evidence. The killer was a ghost, a phantom artist weaving his terrifying masterpieces across the city. The media, no longer just fascinated, was now in a full-blown panic. The maestro of mayhem, the canvas killer, the scarlet sculptor, the nicknames proliferated, each one amplifying the fear and the perverse celebrity of the unseen murderer. The FBI was called in, profilers descending upon New York like vultures. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned criminal psychologist with an unervingly calm demeanor, joined the task force. Her initial assessment only deepened the mystery. "We're looking at someone highly intelligent, meticulous, and with a profound narcissistic streak," Reed explained during a tense briefing. "They crave recognition, validation, but feel profoundly overlooked or wronged by the very system they now terrorize." The M could symbolize a personal name, but it could also signify something thematic, masterpiece, magnitude, manifesto. Each victim, each installation, is a step in a grand, twisted narrative they are creating. So, they see themselves as an artist? Kane pressed, wanting to lash out at the sterile academic analysis of such brutality. "Oh, absolutely," Reed confirmed, her eyes sharp. "Not just an artist, but the artist. They believe they are creating something timeless, something that will force the world to acknowledge their genius. The victims are merely their medium, their canvas, their clay." The pressure on the task force was immense. The mayor demanded answers. The art community was paralyzed by fear. Galleries closed, exhibitions were postponed, and a chilling silence descended upon a world usually so boisterous and self-assured. Everyone looked at everyone else with suspicion. Was the killer a frustrated student? A disgruntled assistant? A former colleague? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. Kane found himself haunted by the blank canvas in Thorne's gallery and the suspended figure of Vance. What was the killer trying to say? Each crime scene was a puzzle, a grotesque communication. The victims were not chosen randomly. They represented different facets of the art world. Thorne, the critic, the judge. Vance, the rebel, the performer. Who would be next? And what aspect of the art world would they represent? One evening, staring at a whiteboard covered with overlapping theories and timelines, Hansen pointed to a detail on Vance's crime scene photos. "Look at the way the waste sculptures are arranged around Vance's body. It's almost like a deconstructed landscape. And the blood smears. They're not just random, Kane. They follow certain lines, certain angles. It reminds me of a topographical map or a circuit board diagram." Kane leaned closer, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Or a blueprint for something larger. Just as they felt a tiny thread of understanding, the city reeled from another blow. This time, the victim was Isabella Rodriguez, a celebrated curator renowned for discovering obscure, avant-garde talent from underprivileged backgrounds. She was found in the sprawling exhibition hall of the Museum of Modern Art, a space she had tirelessly championed. The scale of this artwork dwarfed the previous two. Isabella Rodriguez was not merely placed. She was integrated into a massive, intricate tapestry made entirely of tangled wires, broken glass, and discarded electronics, all meticulously woven together. Her body, drained of blood, was at the very heart of this chilling mosaic, her features serene in death, almost as if she had willingly become part of this horrific creation. The blood, her blood, had been used as a pigment, painting disturbing, almost tribal-like symbols across the vast white walls of the museum. The M was carved into the largest shard of glass that served as the centerpiece of the tapestry, reflecting the stark museum lights like a malevolent jewel. This wasn't just a murder. It was an act of desecration against the very institution Isabella represented. The killer hadn't just used her, but had turned her life's work against her. The public's fear erupted into outright panic. This killer was operating in the most prestigious art institutions, challenging authority, mocking the very essence of public safety. "He's evolving," Dr. Reed stated, her voice tight with a newfound urgency. "The scale, the complexity, the public location. He's pushing the boundaries, testing the limits. He wants to be seen, to be heard, to be immortalized. And he's using the art world itself as his stage." Kane stood amidst the chaos of the museum, the flickering police lights reflecting off the blood-painted walls. The sheer audacity, the meticulous planning, the terrifying artistry of it all was overwhelming. This wasn't just a killer. It was a ghost, a phantom, moving through the city's most secure locations, leaving behind a trail of blood and beauty. He was not just targeting individuals. He was targeting the very soul of the art world, proving his supremacy with each stroke of crimson. He looked at Hansen, her face pale but determined. "This isn't just about catching a killer anymore, Lena. This is about stopping a statement. And if we don't understand what he's trying to say, he'll keep painting this city red." The canvas killer was no longer a local threat. He was a national nightmare in the making. His art was growing, spreading its dark influence, and the world was watching, horrified, as the maestro of mayhem prepared his next, even grander, stroke. The question wasn't just who he was, but what would be his ultimate masterpiece, and how many more lives would be consumed in its creation. The shadow of the canvas killer stretched beyond the jagged skyline of New York City. The nation watched, riveted and terrified, as the grotesque art installations continued. The FBI task force, now a sprawling network of agents and analysts, was overwhelmed by the sheer scale and audacity of the perpetrator. Dr. Evelyn Reed's profile grew darker, more urgent. He's not just seeking recognition, she stressed during a teleconference with field offices across the country. He's making a statement about the very nature of art, about who controls it, who defines it, and who is allowed to create it. Each victim is a brushstroke in his twisted manifesto. 2 weeks after Isabella Rodriguez's murder in MoMA, the M reappeared, this time in the sun-drenched, bohemian heart of Los Angeles. The victim was Stefan Cruz, a renowned sculptor known for his monumental, often politically charged public works. Cruz was found in his sprawling Venice Beach studio, a former aircraft hangar that now housed his colossal creations. The scene was breathtakingly elaborate, a nightmarish tableau that dwarfed even the museum murder. Cruz's body, stripped bare, was meticulously positioned on a massive, unfinished plinth, a base he had intended for his next grand sculpture. His limbs were splayed, but instead of being contorted, they were held in place by intricate harnesses and wires, pulling him taut, as if stretched across an invisible frame. Around him, the studio was transformed into a dizzying labyrinth of Cruz's own discarded sculptures, colossal metal figures, abstract forms of concrete and rebar, all rearranged to form a grotesque, towering maze. Each piece, usually a symbol of strength and permanence, was now subtly, chillingly altered. A limb removed, a head twisted, a surface marred by what appeared to be dried blood, forming a narrative of destruction. And the blood, Stefan Cruz's blood, was not merely smeared. It had been used to paint a gigantic, swirling mural across the central wall of the hangar, a chaotic masterpiece that mirrored the disarray of the sculptures, yet possessed a terrible, calculated symmetry. At its center, glowing under the harsh studio lights, was the ubiquitous M, carved not into Cruz's body, but into a massive polished granite block that lay directly beneath his outstretched hand, as if he were trying to grasp it in his final moments. Detective Kane Riley and Lena Hansen were immediately flown out to L.A. The interagency tension was palpable, but the gravity of the situation transcended petty rivalries. The canvas killer was no longer a New York problem. He was a national crisis. Cruz was about public art, monumental statements, Hansen observed, her voice barely a whisper as they walked through the enormous, echoing studio. He brought art to the masses outside the galleries and museums. So, the killer took his body and turned it into the ultimate public sculpture. Public, or a private nightmare for anyone who sees it, Kane corrected, his eyes scanning the overwhelming scene. The scale. It's like he's trying to outdo himself with each one. What's the endgame here, Lena? Dr. Reed, who had flown in with them, addressed the LAPD and FBI agents. The choice of Cruz is significant. He championed accessibility, art for everyone. The killer is targeting not just the elite of the art world, but also those who democratize it. It's a statement about control, about who gets to define what art is, and who gets to see it. The way Cruz is positioned, stretched, almost like a figure being prepared for dissection. It suggests a tearing down of his ideals, or perhaps an attempt to strip art back to its most primal, essential form. The media went into a frenzy, even more so than before. The killer was now bicoastal, a ghost crossing state lines, mocking law enforcement. The public's fear morphed into a chilling fascination. Hashtags like Canvas Killer and Maestro of Mayhem trended globally. People began theorizing online, dissecting the art, trying to find meaning in the madness, inadvertently playing into the killer's desire for recognition. Back in New York, the task force was running on fumes. The pressure from Washington, D.C. was suffocating. Every art school, every disgruntled student, every art critic with a grudge was scrutinized. Hundreds of potential suspects were interviewed, thousands of leads chased, all to no avail. The killer left no digital footprint, no discernible pattern in their movements beyond the choice of victims and the grotesque signature. Kane and Hansen were back in their precinct, buried under mountains of paperwork, their eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "We're missing something, Kane," Hansen said, frustrated, tapping a pen against a printout of the M symbol. "It's too simple, yet too complex. Is it a person's initial, a word, or something else entirely? What if the M is a key, not a signature?" "A key to what?" Kane grumbled, pulling up schematics of Cruz's studio. "To this elaborate, sick puzzle?" "Exactly. Think about it: Thorne, Vance, Rodriguez, Cruz. They're all pillars, but they represent different dimensions of the art world. Thorne, critique and intellectual gatekeeping. Vance, performance and ephemeral experience. Rodriguez, curation and discovery, the bridge between artist and audience. Cruz, monumental sculpture and public accessibility. What connects these dimensions? What creates the space for them all?" Kane paused, looking at the victims' faces on his screen. "The artist," he finally said. "The creator. He's destroying the ecosystem around the artist. But who is the artist in this equation? Him? Or someone he thinks deserves to be?" Dr. Reed's profiling expanded on this. "The killer sees themselves as an omnipotent artist, but perhaps they're also mourning a lost artist or an unrecognized genius. The M could be a dedication or a proclamation. It's a statement of ownership over the narrative of art itself. They are systematically dismantling the current structure, piece by piece, to rebuild it in their own image." A new lead, or at least a new theory, emerged from the FBI's meticulous database analysis. Decades ago, a relatively unknown art movement briefly emerged in the early 2000s, called metamorphic art. Its proponents believed that true art should not be confined to static forms, but should continuously evolve, incorporating the environment, the audience, and even decay as part of its process. The movement quickly faded, deemed too radical, too transgressive, and too difficult to commercialize by the established art world. One of its most fervent, yet ultimately rejected, figures was a conceptual artist named Marius Thorne. Marius Thorne? Kane's head snapped up. Any relation to Elias Thorne? A quick background check revealed no immediate family connection, but a significant professional one. Marius Thorne, in his younger days, had submitted a particularly controversial metamorphic piece to a gallery show curated by Elias Thorne, then a rising star critic. Elias Thorne had publicly ridiculed the piece, calling it unstructured chaos masquerading as profundity, effectively crushing Marius's nascent career in the mainstream. "It's a long shot," Hansen conceded, "but the name Thorne and the M, and the public humiliation. It fits the disgruntled artist profile Dr. Reed mentioned." Marius Thorne's history was tragic. After the public rejection, he became reclusive, disappearing from the art scene. His last known address was a dilapidated studio in a remote area of New Mexico, and his last known exhibition was a small, self-funded show of transgressive sculptures that garnered no attention. He had a history of mental health issues, described by former associates as prone to obsessive behavior and grandiose delusions, particularly concerning his artistic vision. "He fits the profile of a rejected genius seeking ultimate revenge," Dr. Reed confirmed, her voice laced with a new urgency. "He has the intellect, the artistic background, and a clear motive for targeting the very system that rejected him." The evolution of his artworks, from a confined gallery to a public museum, then to an expansive studio, shows a progression in scale and ambition, mirroring a mind that believes its message is finally being heard and on a grand stage. The task force descended on the New Mexico studio. It was exactly as described: remote, isolated, almost swallowed by the desert. Inside, it was a time capsule of a failed career. Sketches, half-finished sculptures, and manifestos covered every surface. There were meticulous diagrams of the metamorphic art philosophy, with particular emphasis on reclaiming the narrative and transcending the static form. But Marius Thorne was gone. The studio was empty, except for one chilling detail. On a large, dusty canvas, still on its easel, was a half-finished painting. It depicted a sprawling, intricate network of lines and symbols, resembling a complex blueprint. And in the very center of this blueprint, in a bold, almost triumphant red, was a perfectly rendered M. Below it, a scrawled note, almost an afterthought: "The Grand Gallery awaits." The team also found old, crudely rendered sketches of Thorne, Vance, Rodriguez, and Cruz, their faces subtly distorted, almost caricatured, next to what looked like early conceptual designs for their eventual installations. He had been planning this for years, decades even, nursing his festering grudge, meticulously perfecting his horrific craft. "He's been watching them, studying them," Kane muttered, his voice grim, "planning every detail. This isn't just spontaneous rage. It's a cold, calculated campaign." Hansen pointed to the blueprint painting. "The Grand Gallery. Where is it? What is it?" They ran the term Grand Gallery through every database, art history archive, and architectural record. There were countless galleries, large and small, but nothing that screamed ultimate masterpiece or directly linked to Marius Thorne. But then, a detail from an obscure architectural journal caught Hansen's eye. A radical, unbuilt architectural concept from the early 2000s, designed by an ambitious young architect. It was titled The Grand Gallery of Human Expression, an audacious proposal for a massive multi-story structure intended to house all forms of art, from painting to performance, sculpture to digital media, designed to constantly reconfigure its internal spaces. The project was ultimately rejected due to its exorbitant cost and logistical nightmares. The architect, Michael Vartanian. "Another Kane said, a new layer of dread washing over him, and an unbuilt, incredibly ambitious concept for an ultimate art space. Marius Thorne, the rejected artist, obsessed with grand statements and the metamorphic nature of art. And Michael Vartanian, the architect of an ultimate gallery that was never realized. Could they be connected?" A frantic search for Michael Vartanian revealed he had vanished from public life after his project's rejection, becoming deeply disillusioned. There were rumors of a shared art collective in their youth, a fleeting connection between the radical artist and the visionary architect, both equally frustrated by a world that refused to embrace their grand visions. "The canvas killer isn't just one person, Kane," Hansen whispered, her eyes wide with a terrifying realization. "It's two. Or more. Collaboration. A twisted artistic partnership." Dr. Reed, when presented with the theory, looked shaken. A shared delusion of grandeur, fueled by rejection and a desire for ultimate validation. They're building their own gallery, their own world, using the very people who rejected them as the building blocks. And the Grand Gallery awaits note. It's not a location. It's their final piece, the ultimate expression of their vision. The fear was no longer just about catching a killer. It was about preventing the realization of a colossal, horrific masterpiece. The question was no longer where the canvas killer would strike next, but what they would build. The scope had widened terrifyingly. The art world was not just their canvas. It was their quarry, and its greatest minds were their unwilling medium for a grand, terrifying statement that was rapidly approaching its horrifying crescendo. The realization that the canvas killer might be a collaborative effort, an unholy alliance between Marius Thorne and Michael Vartanian, amplified the terror within the task force. Two minds, both brilliant and deeply wronged, fusing their respective disciplines' radical art and visionary architecture to create a singular, devastating work. The M now seemed to represent not just an individual, but a morbid collective, a manifest destiny. Dr. Reed's updated profile was chilling. If this is a partnership, their final piece will be a synthesis of their obsessions. Thorne's metamorphic art philosophy, using decay and the environment, combined with Vartanian's Grand Gallery concept. It won't be a conventional structure. It will be an event, an experience, a monument to their shared grievance, built from the very essence of the art world they despise. The race was on to identify this Grand Gallery. Kane and Hansen, armed with the new theory, delved into the obscure corners of architectural history and avant-garde art movements. They hunted for abandoned buildings, massive warehouses, even natural formations that could be molded into such a vision. They cross-referenced Vartanian's unbuilt designs with known, unpurchased, or defunct properties. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a forgotten article in an online architectural forum discussing Vartanian's early concepts. One comment, made years ago by a user handle MetaSculptor, eerily echoed Thorne's manifestos about art transcending form. The comment mentioned a specific, isolated location, a vast, subterranean complex beneath an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of Detroit. Originally designed in the 1970s as a prototype for a self-sustaining, underground art colony, the project was scrapped due to lack of funding and deemed a fantastical folly. Its blueprints, however, were audacious, a multi-level, labyrinthine structure of concrete and steel, with vast, reconfigurable chambers, light wells, and even integrated water features. It was, in essence, an unbuilt grand gallery. Detroit, Kane breathed, staring at the old blueprints. The city of ruins and rebirth. A perfect canvas for someone obsessed with decay and transformation. The task force mobilized. FBI, local law enforcement, and a specialized tactical unit converged on the abandoned industrial park. The entrance to the subterranean complex was hidden, overgrown, and meticulously sealed. It took hours for the demolition team to breach the main access point. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled of stale concrete and something else. Something metallic and distinctly organic. The complex was massive, stretching deeper than anyone had anticipated. As the teams cautiously advanced, their flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness, revealing a sight that made even the hardened officers gasp. This was it. The Grand Gallery. The interior was a terrifying, breathtaking testament to the killer's genius and their madness. They hadn't merely decorated the existing structure. They had transformed it. Walls had been carved, chambers reconfigured, and new levels constructed from salvaged materials. The industrial skeleton of the complex had been reanimated, not with life, but with a horrifying artistic vision. The first exhibit was a chamber filled with hundreds of art pieces, stolen from galleries and private collections across the country, the very works that the victims had championed, critiqued, or created. But they weren't displayed pristine. Each piece was meticulously defaced, broken, or incorporated into larger, grotesque collages. Classical sculptures wore crowns of barbed wire. Abstract paintings were smeared with dried blood. Digital screens played endless loops of static. It was a museum of desecration, a systematic destruction of everything the art world held sacred. Further in, they found the performance hall. It was a vast, multi-story atrium, the central space of Vartanian's original design. But now it was a terrifying stage. Suspended from the towering ceiling, almost like macabre puppets, were the lifeless forms of dozens of people. Not just art world figures, but also journalists who had extensively covered the canvas killer, law enforcement officials who had spoken out against him, and even ordinary citizens who had expressed particularly vocal opinions online. They were arranged in an intricate, swirling helix, their bodies forming a terrifying, silent chorus. On the chest of each, carved with the familiar precision, was the M. This wasn't just a handful of victims. It was a massacre, a final, definitive statement. He took his art to the extreme, Hansen whispered, her voice trembling. This isn't just about art anymore, Kane. It's about society, about control. Kane's eyes were fixed on the centerpiece of the atrium. At the very bottom of the helix, bathed in a single powerful spotlight that cut through the darkness, stood a podium. On it, a bound figure. "It's Dr. Reed," an FBI agent shouted. Kane felt a surge of cold fury. Dr. Reed, the one who understood their minds, was to be their ultimate prop, their final critique of the system. Suddenly, a voice, amplified by hidden speakers, echoed through the vast space. It was Marius Thorne's, calm, resonant, and utterly devoid of remorse. "Welcome, agents. Welcome to the Grand Gallery of Human Suffering. A true masterpiece, wouldn't you agree? For too long, the art world has dictated what is beautiful, what is meaningful, what is worthy of existence. They judged us, dismissed us, condemned our vision. But now we are the judges. We are the creators. And you, the representatives of their stagnant system, are merely the audience for our ultimate truth. A figure emerged from the shadows at the top of the atrium, silhouetted against a faint emergency light. It was a gaunt man, with wild, artistic eyes and a triumphant smirk. Marius Thorn. He held a remote detonator. Michael and I, Thorn continued, we built this, a living, breathing critique of your world. Each defaced piece, each suspended soul, is a testament to the suffocating mediocrity you champions. And now for the grand finale. Dr. Reed, your astute observations were appreciated, but ultimately you too are merely a component. A symbol of the system that tries to define and categorize what it cannot comprehend. As Thorn spoke, another figure emerged from an adjacent walkway, calmer, more measured in his movements, though his eyes held the same fanatic gleam. Michael Vartanian. He gestured, and small lights began to flicker around the edges of the atrium, illuminating hidden details. The walls were covered with thousands of meticulously etched names, the names of every artist, architect, critic, and institution they believed had wronged them. Kane, focused on Dr. Reed, saw a flicker of movement. Despite being bound, she was subtly working at her restraints, a tiny shard of metal glinting in her hand. She met Kane's gaze, a silent message passing between them. Distract him. Thorn. Vartanian. Kane bellowed, his voice echoing back at him. This isn't art. It's murder. It's the ultimate failure of your own vision. You didn't create anything. You just destroyed. Thorn merely laughed, a high, unhinged sound. Destroy? No, detective. We simply removed the impurities. We cleared the canvas for something truly magnificent. He raised the detonator. A final metamorphic transformation. Just as Thorn's finger hovered over the button, Dr. Reed, with a surge of adrenaline, broke free of her final restraint. She didn't try to run, but instead, with a surprising burst of speed, lunged for the podium, knocking a hidden microphone array, specifically set up to broadcast the event, crashing to the floor. The sudden noise, the unexpected resistance, startled Thorn. Vartanian, ever the architect of precision, reacted instantly, drawing a concealed blade and moving to intercept Dr. Reed. But Kane and Hansen, anticipating a confrontation, had already given the signal. Tactical teams, who had been stealthily positioning themselves in the labyrinthine corridors, burst into the atrium. The vast chamber erupted into chaos. Gunshots reverberated, flashbangs exploded, and the terrifying silence of the gallery was shattered. Thorn, disoriented by the chaos, hesitated. It was enough. Kane, leading a small team, rushed the podium, taking down Vartanian in a brutal, hand-to-hand struggle. Vartanian, despite his refined appearance, fought with a desperate, animalistic ferocity, driven by his unraveling masterpiece. Meanwhile, Hansen cornered Thorn at the top of the atrium. He still clutched the detonator, his eyes wild, looking down at the unfolding battle below. "You don't understand," he screamed, his voice raw with despair and rage. "This is our legacy, our truth." Hansen, recognizing the desperate, cornered animal in his eyes, didn't hesitate. She fired, hitting the detonator in his hand. The device exploded in a shower of sparks, harmlessly, but Thorn stumbled back, losing his footing on the precarious walkway. He fell, screaming, tumbling down the dizzying height of the atrium, his body landing with a sickening thud amidst his own horrific artwork. The battle was over. Marius Thorn and Michael Vartanian, the canvas killers, were dead. The grand gallery of human suffering, their ultimate masterpiece, was exposed to the light. The dozens of victims were carefully, reverently recovered. The stolen and defaced art pieces were catalogued, their desecration a stark reminder of the killers' profound hatred. In the aftermath, the world grappled with the horror. The sheer scale of the Detroit massacre, the cold calculation, the perversion of art itself, left an indelible scar on the national consciousness. The media, initially feeding the frenzy, now faced a reckoning, complicit in inadvertently fueling the killer's desire for attention. Kane and Hansen stood in the silence of the now-secured atrium, Dr. Reed by their side, shaken but alive. The M, carved on each victim, the symbol of their tormentors, remained a chilling testament to their reign of terror. It was gone, but its legacy would linger. They wanted to create something timeless, Hansen mused, looking up at the empty spaces where the victims had hung. They succeeded in a twisted way, but not the masterpiece they envisioned. No, Kane agreed, his gaze sweeping across the desecrated gallery. They created a monument, all right. A monument to human depravity, and to the chilling fragility of sanity when genius is left unchecked by empathy. The canvas killers were silenced, their brushes laid down forever. But the Scarlet Symphony they had painted across America, a symphony composed of blood and shattered dreams, would echo for generations, a terrifying reminder of the thin line between artistic genius and monstrous madness. The Grand Gallery was dismantled, but the shadows it cast would remain, forever altering how the world viewed art and the dark depths of the human soul.